All right. So my main topic today, guys, I want to end this on a note and a topic that kind of, I don't know, it feels like closing a chapter when you see this documentary. It's Norman's Rare Guitars
Yeah, on Netflix.
on Netflix. Okay, um, it came out here early this year. I think at the beginning of the year. So it tells you his whole story about how he got the business, how he started the business. Kind of even goes into some health struggles. Even talks about who might take it over. There's some interesting stuff. Mark Agnesi. I mean, there's a slew of famous people talking about Norman's Rare Guitars. What was your take on it? What do you remember about it?
So I watched the documentary. I had not got to watch it until last night.
Oh, okay.
I watched it last night, so it's very fresh for me.
Okay.
Um, there is tons of people that's on the documentary talking about it. Slash is on there. I mean, everybody you can think of
Yep.
is pictured in it for sure
Sambora.
with Norm. But then there's big heavy hitters talking about it.
Right.
I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really interesting. Kiefer Sutherland is the guy that produced it, and he's in it.
Yeah.
Um, I thought it was awesome to hear Norm's story because I didn't know it. I actually have not been to Norm's yet. It seems wrong.
I know.
But next time I go to the West Coast, I'm definitely going to have to check it out.
Yeah.
Because I just have not done it yet, not pulled the trigger on that. That's one of those, there's so many legendary spots you want to go to
Yeah.
as a guitar player and a gearhead. You can't
I
help.
feel like there's 4 in the U.S. There's Norm's, Grun's, Wildwood, and Chicago Music Exchange.
Yeah, you could make like Manny's up in New York. That's a big one.
Okay.
Right? Like there's been multiple places.
I feel like those are the heavy hitters, though.
Yeah, those are big hitters for sure. There's more that we're definitely forgetting. But
Probably.
anyway,
Don't take offense to us.
so I thought it was really awesome to hear Norm's story about how he got started. It made me sad to hear all the guitar prices that he used to buy them for. So sad. I found it interesting about like the few famous players that kind of put him on the map. He started to bring George Harrison into his house.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, he's telling his wife, he's like, hey, honey, I'm about to bring George Harrison in, and she's like in a bathrobe, and she's like, oh, okay.
And then he walks
And
in.
he walks in, and she's like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And George bought 2 like bursts that day.
Mm.
So it was really interesting to see his story. I thought it was cool. I think it shows his life in a beautiful way.
Right.
Um,
It almost felt like it was a celebration of life.
yeah, it kind of felt like he's dead. It's so sad
I'm
to
laughing.
say.
I'm laughing. It's not funny.
Yeah.
But it does feel like that.
Yeah, which I mean, obviously he's not, and he's out there doing it still every day.
Mm-hmm.
He did have that like little bout of illness, which they do cover in the documentary.
Right.
But he's out there doing it every day. It did feel like a celebration of life. Like, look what Norm has built. Look what he's done. It was just celebrating kind of everybody he brought together. It is pretty amazing, really.
It's pretty cool.
What was your thoughts on it?
Yeah, no, I thought it was super informational just about how he started. I thought it was really cool how kind of talks from the beginnings with his wife and how they kind of made this kind of happen together. His daughter is kind of helping out too, but he doesn't foresee it going necessarily to family, which is kind of odd.
Yeah, because he doesn't have anybody that's really. Everybody's doing it for him because they see his passion in it. But
Right.
yeah, there's nobody in his family that he really looks to hand it over to.
Obviously he has a good relationship with Joe Bonamassa because Bonamassa's probably bought half his inventory.
Yeah.
So it talks about how they would like for Joe to be the successor, but Joe's so busy. I don't see that ever
I
happening.
think it was Norm's wife that says it in the documentary.
Yeah.
That she doesn't necessarily say for sure or anything.
Right. It's just a suggested thing, like who's the type of person, and she said someone like Joe.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like because Mark Agnesi worked there for so long, he would be a great spokesperson for that. Now I don't know. I know he left and he's with Gibson, so I don't know how things ended. I would imagine things. He's in the documentary, so I would think it's pretty amicable.
Yeah, I've seen them like together before in different videos, and whatever the relationship is, it seems to be really good. I don't think he left on bad terms. I think he just got a really good offer from Gibson,
Right.
and moved to Nashville for that.
Yeah, so I feel like he would be a great spokesperson because he worked there for a long time. He's got a recognizable face. He could take over the business. I feel like that wouldn't be a bad idea, but I don't know how everything worked out. I thought it was going to be more about, when I turned it on, I thought they were going to go into more details on like what type of guitars are we looking for. I did think it was cool how they said they have so much in the vaults in the back.
Watching it, seeing those crates
Uh-huh.
that he supposedly has,
Yeah.
and you could see like little pictures of some of the guitars.
It's almost like Indiana Jones.
They looked like mint condition.
Oh,
Some of that stuff, and
pristine.
Tim Pierce is in it talking about like how he grabbed the tuners, and I guess it was one of those buttons, and it just like disintegrates in his hand.
Yeah, turns the sand.
And he's like, "Sorry about that, Norm." And Norm's like, "Oh, it happens all the time."
Yeah.
Those guitars are so interesting to me, but that part kind of made me sad.
Yeah, because no one's playing them.
They will never be seen until he's gone, and then they'll probably do a big blowout. I mean, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but they could. It happens with a lot of people when they do pass, that they do a big auction and they're like, "This is Norm's private collection, and we're going to auction it off." And he's big on the charity stuff. They talk about that.
I was about to say, I could see him donating it to a museum or something like that. You know what I mean?
It's
I think it would, because he does have a lot of collection pieces that you see in the documentary, which is cool. But it's also kind of sad because no one plays them.
How many of those has been setting in his vaults for 40 years, 50 years?
My thing is, he's got some he totally forgets he has, right?
I think he's very like intelligent. He's very on it with everything. I think he's got a spreadsheet with every single guitar he's probably owned or does own.
Yeah, that's probably true.
I mean,
you don't have a business like that without being organized. So
yeah, and
I don't know.
I thought it was really interesting. I don't foresee Joe Bonamassa taking that business over.
No, he's too busy with his own thing.
And maybe Joe's the guy that holds on to Norm's stuff when he does pass that stuff from the vault and sets up like a museum. I could see something like that happening.
I could see that too.
But I don't want to be morbid with this subject because the documentary was really cool.
Yeah.
I would have liked to heard a little more, like, as bad as it sounds, it seems like once he got going, like there was no struggles. Like it would have been interesting to find a little more like detailed information on like, man, this one time I totally got ripped off on this guitar because I didn't know this or I didn't know that. Like that's bound to happen. It's going to happen to everybody. But
I would like to see more of his, like, how he knows it's an original. You know what I mean? Like when he was first doing it, because there wasn't a lot of information at the time back then.
or somebody going through a full appraisal process now.
Yeah,
Like that would have been interesting
that would
too.
be cool.
It was amazing. Go watch it if you haven't watched it. Even if you're not a vintage guitar nerd, it's really interesting. We are definitely vintage guitar nerds.
Yeah.
But also don't discount the fact of, Kiefer Sutherland put this out for him and produced it for him and set it up. And that's awesome. And I really respect Norm. But it's not like he's the only guy that's done this.
I was about to say, George Gruen has been doing this for years too.
George Gruen's been doing this, I think, just as long. He started in the 70s too. I forgot exactly what year it was that he started. And he was kind of like Norm. He was selling out of his car. He was selling out of his house. And then he eventually got a store.
And talk about another encyclopedia. That guy knows everything.
Oh my gosh. He's a genius when it comes to it. I'm not saying more than Norm. I'm just saying it's
Yeah.
just different. And
Different areas and, different inventory.
talk about players that came through his shop too. He's had everybody in the world.
Right. I would
So-
like to see George do a documentary, but more on the ins and outs of
I don't think he can.
why.
Because George is the type of guy, if he's going to do it, he's not doing it 50%. He's doing it 1,000,000%.
That's true.
And the documentary
You
will
know-
be 12 hours long.
I think we need a series.
I would like that.
I think he needs his own series and talks about, because he needs like one episode just on Martin guitars, one episode just on
Pre-war
Gibson
Martin guitars. And I'm serious.
Yeah.
Like, he could do it. Just Banner Gibson acoustics.
I tell you what though, I'd watch every bit of that.
Me too. I would love it. I think that it's a great documentary. Go out and watch it. But whenever you watch it, don't think like, oh, Norm's the only guy that's ever done this. Like right around that time, it all started happening. Maybe Norm was the first one to do it. Maybe he wasn't. I'd have to check all those dates again.
I mean, he definitely was the pioneer.
He was one of the pioneers,
Yeah.
for sure. But don't discount like your local shops. Some of these shops have been around for 30 years and they're just as interesting with just as much stuff going on. We've got a local vintage shop in the area that, I mean, all the time there's people rolling in and out of there. There's pictures of Billy Gibbons there. There's pictures, I mean, in the last month or two, Billy Joe Armstrong was just in there and bought a Les Paul Jr. and there's a picture of him there with it. And like, go check out your local vintage shops if you've got any, or your closest city, because most likely they've been there a while.
Right.
And yeah, it's interesting.
It's a cool documentary. You should watch it. It kind of gets you in the mode of like, man, I need a vintage piece.
Oh,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? Like I watched it and I was like, yeah, I've got a vintage Bassman, but I need a guitar.
Yeah, it started rumbling things in my head.
Yeah.
So we can talk more about that later.
Okay.
But what's you guys' thoughts on this? Put them down below.
Yep. See ya.
See you next week.